I can't believe I'm saying this literally a month after Help Wanted 2 came out, but a new FNAF game has just been announced and it looks so good. Now, it wasn't supposed to be announced yet, but Scott said it's okay to cover what's come out about it, so that's what we're doing today. It's also seemingly an adaptation of the first story of the very first Fazbear Frights book, Into the Pit. So what exactly does this all mean? Well, that's what we're here today to discuss. So slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. First, let's gather our ingredients, but before we can go over the trailer and everything that it shows us, because yes, there is a trailer, it would probably be best to go over what the actual story this game is adapting is. It's been a while, but I think it's finally time for a new FNAF thing is making a FNAF book relevant, so Rye has to summarize it because at least half of the fandom won't or can't read that book. Time. But instead of a new book that hasn't come out yet or anything like that, we're actually going a bit back in time to 2022, because that's when Into the Pit came out, January 2022. The story follows Oswald, whose family has come up on hard times, along with the rest of the town. Their town had a mill that employed a majority of the adults there, and that mill closed. So a bunch of people all at once lost their jobs, and businesses started to fail because people didn't have money to spend there. The family of his best friend Ben actually moved away for that very reason. But since Oswald's mom had a steady job at the nearby hospital and they didn't want to lose that, Oswald's family opted to stay, and his dad just got a part-time job. This all adds up to Oswald's worst summer ever. Every day, all he's able to do is go to the library, then go across the street to Jeff's Pizza and get a slice and soda, waiting it out until his parents can pick him up. This was alright at first, but after a while it got really stale, especially for the entire summer. Eventually, after a big fight Oswald has with his dad, he decides to go straight to Jeff's Pizza and to make his dad work for it. He felt a little left behind by his family, so he wanted his dad to have to come inside Jeff's Pizza and find him, so he hides in the abandoned ball pit in the back of Jeff's Pizza. As he gets in there, he's immediately grossed out by how dirty and unkempt it is, but when he comes out of the ball pit, he's suddenly in the same place, but it's brand new. There's a bunch of retro arcade machines, kids, families, people laughing, and Freddy Fazbear Pizza branding all over the place. Judging from the games and clothes of people, he starts to think he traveled back in time, and the next time he does this, he confirms it by finding a calendar that's dated 1985. This building is what Jeff's Pizza once was, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He starts spending his days in this other world, playing games and hanging out with the kids there, all the while in the background being stared down by a creepy yellow rabbit animatronic. However, one day when he enters the ball pit, it's a different scene entirely. The usual jovialness is replaced with screaming and police sirens and people running in fear. All the while, that same yellow rabbit animatronic beckons Oswald to a back room. He's off put, but he is curious, and after all, his logic says that if he's in the past, it's not like he can get hurt, he's not technically even born yet. But when he gets to that back room, he encounters, and I quote, "They were lined up against the wall, which was painted with images of the place's mascots, the grinning bear, the blue bunny, and the bird girl. Half a dozen kids, none of them older than Oswald, their lifeless bodies propped into sitting positions. The rabbit lunges at him, but he escapes and runs back to the ball pit. When he comes out on the other side, he finds his father berating him for hiding for so long and wasting his time. But that rabbit follows suit, grabbing Oswald's father and fighting him in the ball pit. After some time, the rabbit emerges and essentially forces Oswald to leave. Nobody seems to realize what this is, but the rabbit drives Oswald home, takes him to his room, and stays outside of his door. Eventually, when Oswald's mother gets back, she says that nothing is wrong and Oswald's father is fine. And in the morning, expecting that to be the case, he instead finds that rabbit sitting across from him. For the next couple of days, a sort of animatronic hostage situation takes place where Oswald has to pretend that everything is fine in front of other people, but he knows that's not his father. It's this weird yellow rabbit animatronic. But after a few days of this insanity going by, he books it back to Jeff's Pizza and tries to get back in the ball pit. When he does, he finds his father's unconscious body in the ball pit. As he's pulling him out though, that yellow rabbit animatronic tries to stop him. They have a back and forth, but Oswald manages to push him into some stray netting and rope. And after struggling, much like Clayton from Tarzan, the yellow rabbit animatronic ends up hanging itself in the struggle. Oswald's father wakes up and they both notice an empty yellow rabbit suit hanging from the ropes. Creepy, but nothing like what it was before. They then leave. It's a weird story to be sure, and I left out a lot of details in the interest of time. I'd really recommend reading it yourself, especially with the game coming out. And if you can't buy it at like a Barnes & Noble, try finding it at a library. And if you somehow don't have any libraries nearby, there are resources online like Ozone's audiobooks that you could listen to. So if that's the story the game is presenting to us, what do we actually know know about the game. Well, unfortunately, while this news is amazing, it did spawn from a leak, beginning with Scholastic of all places leaking the game's existence at all. On a flyer going over all things FNAF, they had a single blurb that said, quote, "Into the Pit, new game coming soon," which was really interesting, and people were wondering if it was just a mistake by Scholastic's part, but soon after that, substantial leaks started to happen. However, as the subreddit was cranking down on that and trying to ban anyone sharing it, Scott himself did make a comment on the subreddit, saying, quote, "No need to keep it all hush-hush, it's okay. Yes, I was trying to keep it a secret for a bit longer, but now that it's out, that's fine. This game has been in development for a really long time actually, and I'm really proud of the final product. It will be a 10th anniversary game. Smile." Which also does confirm that this game is slated to come out this year. After all, if it's a 10th anniversary game, this year is the 10th anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's, which is insane to think about, but whatever. Not to mention, and this is going into language dissection, so take it with a grain of salt, but he said, quote, "This is a game, not the game," which could mean more than one game will be a 10th anniversary FNAF game, but who knows. The important takeaway here is Scott gave his blessing to talk about these leaks, so that's what we're gonna do. Starting with the description, quote, "Fall into the pit," and I'm not reading this whole thing. Look, I'll leave it on the screen the whole time we talk about it if you want to read through the whole thing, but we've already been here for long enough and we're going to be here even longer, so I'm just gonna go over some highlights. Survive the 5 nights of terror. This is really interesting phrasing. If there is actually 5 nights worth of gameplay within this game and it's accurate to the story, we can actually map out how this game will progress. After all, the yellow rabbit animatronic from the pit is only in the real world for 2 days. So theoretically, the first 3 days of gameplay would have us avoid the Bonnie in the pit, and then the last 2 days of gameplay would have us avoid the Bonnie out of the pit, which does make an understandable game progression and makes for a realistic difficulty curve. Outrun the threat chasing you through both universes. Move swiftly and stay hidden, and you may just survive. This is particularly interesting, as it is a departure from what we see in the books. Book Into the Pit has Oswald just playing along and acting as everything is normal until the final encounter, which he basically just fights him. But this phrasing more so makes it seem like this rabbit will be an active threat throughout much of the game, not something we're playing along with. However, I do want to contest that with something we'll get into much later in the video, so just make a mental note. Oswald's father and 5 children from the past could all meet their end if you don't save them. This is yet again a departure from the story. In the books, we see the kids already dead and book it, but this seems like in this game we'll have an opportunity to save these children and prevent it from happening in the first place. Not only that, but it mentions 5 children. This brings up an interesting issue. One of the reasons that I've argued in the past that Into the Pit, while it gives us information about the missing child incident, isn't fully accurate to the game's timeline version of the missing child incident is that in the book it says half a dozen, which a dozen is 12, half a dozen is 6. And then in the graphic novel, we again see 6 children, and we know for a fact the missing child incident had 5 victims, not 6. So with this description, realistically we have 2 options. The book version of Into the Pit, while close, isn't fully accurate, and this game will present Into the Pit in a fully game accurate version to give us more information about the missing child incident. That's, I think, the most likely option. But there is another option here, which is that Scott just can't count, or he thinks that half a dozen is a good description to use that rounds up 5, which is crazy. I'm not sure. Finally, uncover secrets and fatal minigames, discover different endings. For one, to me, this sounds like death minigames are back, like we had in FNAF 2, Sister Location, so on and so forth. But 2, different endings make sense here. If I had to guess, at least 2 endings will be had whether or not we save the 5 missing child incident kids. But there could be even more than that. After all, there's combinations here. Oswald's father could die, but we could survive. We could save Oswald's father and the missing child incident victims. Or maybe we just save the missing child incident victims. Like, there's combinations here that could make different endings. But I think at least 2 endings of Oswald and his father survive, but did you save the missing child incident kids? Okay, bye again. God, you have so much fur. So with all this juicy information from the description that we have, what do we actually see in the trailer? Well, first of all, I gotta say, I love this art style. The like slightly pixelated graphics. It's reminiscent of like Game Boy games, like early Pokemon. And things like that. But we also see that this is going to be a sort of 2.5D adventure puzzle game. We open on Jeff's Pizza, which makes sense, we see that in the books. But we immediately cut to a shot that is presumably right before we see the missing child incident victims. After all, in the book, the pit Bonnie, quote, beckoned for Oswald to come inside. And this really feels like it's beckoning us to come inside. After that, we get a sense of how this game is going to break away from the book and make it more of like actual gameplay, where we see Oswald exit a vent, which could be fast travel, it could be a hiding spot, we're not sure. After he exits this vent though, we enter the dining room, which has some interesting Easter eggs. We get this poster, which at first does seem like the Toy Bonnie poster, but that then presents some problems. Toy Bonnie as a full animatronic isn't in use until 1987 in the FNAF 2 location, and Into the Pit states that this flashback is in 1985, making this seem somewhat strange. This could be a lot of things. It could just be a visual Easter egg, it could be implying that we're not traveling back to 1985 but rather 87, or maybe multiple dates. But there is another very interesting possibility here. Before Security Breach came out, some old concept art of FNAF characters got shared online. I first saw it in FNAF's video talking about the origins of FNAF. Great video, by the way. And in that video, he talks about how these seem like early Springlock designs of these characters, which I do agree with. But focus for a moment. This Bonnie looks a hell of a lot like this Bonnie. Not saying this is a guarantee, but it's worth noting. Regardless, it's an interesting poster. Also in the same room, we get this poster, which like, cool, Freddy can ball. We then see what seems to be the surfing area, and then almost a one-for-one recreation of a scene from Into the Pit. It's when Oswald exits the ball pit after seeing the missing child incident victims, and his father berates him. It even says it word for word, quote, "What were you thinking hiding in that nasty old thing? Didn't you hear me calling you?" And then he gets attacked by the Pit Bonnie and replaced. We then see Oswald run for a bit, and we get to see one of the survival mechanics we'll have to employ during the game, where he hides within Golden Freddy. But before we even talk about that, there's another weird poster in the background, Balloon Boy. Balloon Boy, as far as we're aware, is a FNAF 2 character through and through, so why the hell is he here? Now granted, Balloon Boy has always kind of been a weird little guy, so maybe he wasn't originally from FNAF 2 but was reused there. It's hard to tell. Then I assume we see Oswald like fail a skill check and get eaten. I don't know. It looks cool. And before we summarize all of this and talk about like what is probably going to happen in the game, there is more information we got from a suspected Jeff's Pizza ARG. From what I've been able to gather online, there is a website called jeffspizza.club, but don't bother going there because as of recording this, jeffspizza.club is down and locked for maintenance. However, some folks on the subreddit and Twitter were extracting as much information and images as they could, and it seems like this website was hosting images that would either eventually be shown as teasers or be hidden in some kind of ARG. Some of these images are pretty straightforward, like a menu for Jeff's Pizza, a kid's activity card, stuff like that. But then we also get this very stylized, differently styled than the gameplay we've seen, interior of Jeff's Pizza. Now this could be a few things. This could be a landing page for the website, this could even be the background for a main menu screen, but I think it could also be part of an ending cutscene. Not sure to be honest, but it's worth noting that it's a different style than the gameplay we've seen. That's all cool and all, but these next images really are where you get a lot of meat and honestly, more information than the trailer gave us. Starting with this one. To me, this reads as the scene from Into the Pit where Oswald wakes up and sees Pit Bonnie where his dad should be at the breakfast table. This is what I wanted you to leave a mental note for the future, because this is almost one for one with the books, where in that moment Oswald is playing along as to not alert suspicion or be in danger. So with this and what we saw in the trailer and what we read in the description, it seems like this gameplay will kind of be a blend of just fast-paced avoiding and puzzle solving against Pit Bonnie, but also playing along during the day, and maybe that's where some of the puzzle mechanics will come from. We then have this shot of presumably Oswald's bedroom, which is definitely run down, but this poster in the background is a nice nod to the fact that him and his father love cheesy sci-fi monster movies. This next shot of what looks like the kitchen of Freddy's is another departure from Into the Pit. After all, in the story, none of the Freddy's animatronics are acting weird, it's just this Pit Bonnie. Meanwhile, this Chica is acting weird, it looks possessed, it might even be infected by agony, noting the fully black eyes. It's hard to tell with just this screenshot, but it is worth noting that this is specifically the FNAF 1 Chica, not Withered Chica. That's important because in 1985, the only Chica that would have existed is the pre-withered original Chica, which in FNAF 2 has 3 toes. A Chica with 2 toes only exists in FNAF 1, which is after it's been refurbished after 1987. Again, this is pointing to the dates not exactly lining up the way we expect them to. At this point, I have a feeling we might be traveling all over the FNAF timeline, not just in 1985. 1985. Why do I keep looking over there? I think I'm just really excited. It's just a light over there. Like, it's also 2 a.m., so, you know. Finally, possibly the biggest reveal so far, the mill. Now, granted, this image doesn't directly say that it's the mill, but the file name is the mill, so like we can assume. In Into the Pit, we never actually visit the mill, we just hear about it. But it's the mill's closing that causes all of the money troubles for the town and Oswald's family. Interestingly enough, looking through the dumpsters and trash of the mill, it's filled with Fazbear memorabilia. Trash and the Gang, Toy Bonnie's guitar, Helpy. So this is definitely strange and could point to whatever else is going on in this whole timeline shenanigan. So that's everything we know about this game so far that has been shown off or leaked, and everything we know about Into the Pit, the story the game is recreating. So what do I think is going to happen? And take this as fact. I have never been wrong once in my entire YouTube career. Honestly, right now with what we have, I don't think this game is going to be a one-to-one recreation of Into the Pit. And the main reason is all the weird timeline shenanigans we've seen so far. The weird Bonnie poster, Balloon Boy, FNAF 1 Chica. There's even a poster of Circus Baby. I don't know where it came from, but somebody shared it on the subreddit. I think the modern day storyline will remain mostly the same, where Oswald is going to Jeff's Pizza, going in the ball pit, and eventually Pit Bonnie replaces Oswald's father and they have to like duke it out. However, I think Oswald is going to be seeing a lot more of the FNAF timeline. In the Fazbear Frights epilogue, now this is going to go crazy, so bake with me for a moment. But in the Fazbear Frights epilogue, we learn that a detective looking into disappearances finds that there are blood samples in that ball pit dating back 30 years or so, and each of those blood samples coincide with the same year that somebody went missing. It's also implied in Into the Pit and throughout these epilogues that Agony is part of a lot of the weird shit that's going on around this place. Now, pause. Quick catch up for my non-readers. Not a lot is confirmed about Agony, like Remnant, but it also functions similar kind of to Remnant. As a scientist, Phineas Taggart in the books explains, quote, "My work is focused on my hypothesis that you can take a saturation of agony, add any kind of intelligence, even an artificial one, and they will combine together to transmute the energy of emotion into the energy of physical action. This, I believe, is what explains what people call haunted objects. Said agony is often descripted or resembling some viscous black substance. All this to say that ball pit could house agony from over 3 decades worth of victims. And while we've never had a good explanation for how time travel could work in the Fazbear Frights books, we do have good explanations of possession and hallucinations. I think this game is going to see Oswald entering the ball pit and either through possession or other agony-based shenanigans, see and experience several parts of the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline, and in his own mind try to save the 5 victims of the missing child incident without losing himself to it. Either that, or it's just Into the Pit with a lot of like really fun Easter eggs and references. It's probably the second option. But what do you think about the game? I didn't mention it thus far, but I'm so excited. It looks so cool and such a breath of fresh air. Like don't get me wrong, I loved Help Wanted 2 and I like where the series is going, but like a new different game that's nothing like a FNAF game, and it looks good and genuinely scary. And I know right now is usually where I link to like another video to watch, and this video will probably perform a little bit worse because I'm not doing that. But instead of doing that, I really want to announce them. Next Friday, February 2nd, I'm going to be doing a Poppy Playtime Marathon charity stream where I play through Poppy Playtime Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3 all in one sitting. And I'll try to do it as fast as I can to like kind of be the first official speedrun of all 3 games. Maybe I won't be the first, but you know, I'll be one of them. And all of this to raise money for Palestine Children's Relief Fund. It's a wonderful charity focused on the medical and humanitarian aid for the young peoples in Palestine. As an incentive to donate, if we reach the goal of $2,000, I will do a future stream where, while blindfolded, I will learn and beat Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 or Poppy Playtime Chapter 2, which one will be a lot easier, but you are the ones who get to vote which one I do by donating. It'll be a lot of fun, and I hope to see you there. In the meantime, if you want your art showcased on the channel, make sure to use #RideTart, and a huge shout out, as always, to the best channel members, the Dough Risers. And until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.